Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Thank you for joining me. And at the second half of the show, Jeff Graham, Executive Director at Georgia Equality, will be doing so as well. There's legislation still making its way through the final phases, the final days of the Georgia General Assembly, and the culture warriors are out there doing their thing again. Religious freedom bills and more medical bans for folks who are on state insurance, who might have trans children. There's plenty to discuss. And we'll also talk about the tug of war, the push and pull that seems to be going on a little bit within the Democratic Party when it comes to which direction the party is going to go. And this perception that by advocating for LGBTQ plus rights, that is a pull to the far left. It should be a fascinating conversation. Looking forward to that. I want to start with something that we heard a lot about during the Biden presidency, how Joe Biden, his presidency was being managed by folks other than Joe Biden, that he had handlers, you know? This question, while President Donald Trump was in the Oval Office yesterday taking questions from reporters, made me start thinking about that in the midst of all of this signal chat conversation. First of all, listen to the question.
Have you been briefed about the soldiers in Lithuania who are missing?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, he hadn't been briefed on that. Much like when the Jeffrey Goldberg Atlantic story dropped, he hadn't for a couple of hours been briefed on that either. And in that signal chat, which, by the way, the Atlantic released, it's literally calling, I think, the Trump intelligence cabal's bluff. They went before the U.S. Senate subcommittee the other day, Tulsi Gabbard and Radcliffe, and said, well, that wasn't a classified conversation. We've now seen the conversation, and there's broad agreement that when you're seeing the New York Post rail on this, the Rupert Murdoch-owned New York Post rail on this, then you know you've lost the conversation. Anyway, the Atlantic called their bluff, posted the entire conversation, and said, all right, if it's unclassified, then we're going to let it go. J.D. Vance, early in this signal chat conversation, writing, team, I am out for the day doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we are making a mistake. 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez, 40% of European trade does. There is, by the way, this conversation happening within this click on the signal chat about our European allies, a lot of insulting language, insulting conversation being had. It's just more embarrassment, you know? And whether or not we're going to be compensated for it's just, it's gross MAGA international diplomacy duncery. And J.D. Vance kicked that off. He said, there is a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. Speaking of the navigable trade. The strongest reason to do this is, as POTUS said, to send a message. J.D. Vance continues, but I am not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There's a further risk that we see a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. I'm willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself. Well, he didn't. But there is a strong argument for delaying this a month, doing the messaging work on why this matters, seeing where the economy is, etc. First of all, this entire conversation happened on Saturday, March 15th, around 11:45 a.m. Which begs the question, where was President Donald Trump on March 15th at 11:45 a.m.? So I don't know if you knew this, but you can go to rollcall.com. In fact, I'll include this in the show notes, ronshowatl.com. Rollcall.com has a running tab on the president's schedule. And when you go back to Saturday, March 15th of 2025, you'll find, as I did, that President Donald Trump was in Mar-a-Lago that day, except when he wasn't. I mean, he's a busy man. He's a president. So he got up that morning and departed for the Trump International Golf Club. At 8:14 a.m., 7 minutes later, he arrived. And from 8:21 to 2:29 p.m., we assume he was playing golf. I mean, that's a lot of time to spend at one place if you're the President of the United States, a busy man. When you have military action taking place, or do you even know about it? Oh, you approved it before you took off, maybe. Who knows? The President of the United States couldn't be bothered to dip into a skiff to be in the loop as this action was taking place. You're the President of the United States, and you are on the golf course. You're unaware of missing American soldiers in Lithuania, and as is clear in this signal conversation, you weren't even in the conversation or following through, following up, as the military action was taking place. For 4 years, we heard about Sleepy Joe in the basement, always on vacation at the beach, and handlers doing things. We didn't elect them. We heard all of that conversation for 4 years. Back to the conversation being had on Signal, by the way, with a journalist nobody knew about, and looped in, reading all along, and God knows who else, because it's on the Signal app, which defense and intelligence experts had been warning government officials not to use as recently as last month. Pete Hegseth, SecDef, responding to Vice President J.D. Vance, writes, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising with POTUS important considerations. Well, he's on the golf course. He's too busy, so that's not going to happen. Most of which are tough to know how they play out. Economy, Ukraine peace, Gaza, etc. I think messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why, that's you're even discussing. Remember, we weren't even talking about the Houthis or targets or yada, yada, yada. Well, we mentioned the Houthis right away. Which is why we would need to stay focused on, one, Biden failed, and two, Iran funded. Okay, first of all, President Joe Biden authorized hundreds of attacks on Houthi rebels. Hundreds. If you don't know that, maybe it's because his inner circle didn't use Snapchat or WhatsApp or Signal or Facebook Messenger or anything else unsecure in the first place. But to prove that this is something that is just a continuation of Biden policy, honestly, there's some analysis in the New York Times. Peter Eavis and Ismail Nar write a good deal about how these airstrikes really aren't going to stop the Houthis from doing what they're doing. They write, the bombshell publication of a group chat involving Trump administration officials discussing U.S. battle plans revealed in unusually stark fashion what the Trump administration hopes to achieve with the airstrikes this month against the Houthi militia in Yemen. And remember, so far we've talked about messaging between J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth and the crew, discussing messaging, optics, what this is going to look like, how they're going to spin it. Do we wait a month? Do we do it now? Back to the analysis. The attacks, some of the chat's participants said, were meant to deter the Houthis from attacking commercial ships in the Red Sea and reopen shipping lanes to the Suez Canal. Whether it's now or several weeks from now, it will have to be the United States that reopens these shipping lanes, said a participant identified as Michael Waltz, President Trump's national security advisor. But the high-level hopes expressed in the Signal chat, which became public after the Atlantic's editor-in-chief was inadvertently added to it, could collide with reality. Middle East experts said the Iran-backed Houthis won't be easily beaten. Few wars have been won with air power alone, and some military experts say it will be no different with the Houthis. The biggest shipping companies also have little appetite for returning to the Red Sea. They have found a workaround that, while inconvenient and costly, allows them to avoid those lanes and deliver goods on time. James R. Holmes, the J.C. Wiley Chair of Maritime Strategy at the Naval Wars College in Rhode Island, that sounds like a fun gig, said that even during the U.S. war to remove Iraq from Kuwait in 1991, when air power was at its apex, a land invasion was necessary, and defeating the Houthis might require an occupation. You have to control turf to win, Mr. Holmes said. Aircraft cannot occupy territory, however valuable a supporting capability they are for armies and Marines. The Houthis may even use the U.S. military strikes, analysts say, to bolster their position in Yemen and further afield as other Iranian proxies, like the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah, have suffered heavy losses at the hands of Israel. The latest U.S. strikes are a direct answer to the Houthi prayers to have a war with the U.S., said Faria al-Maslami, a Yemeni research fellow at Chatham House, a research institute based in London. He said the group, quote, wants to drag the U.S. into a larger regional escalation. But to reiterate, this is something that even the Biden administration was attempting to do. The group withstood 7 years of Saudi-led airstrikes and a year of U.S. strikes under the Biden administration, which yielded little effect, said Luca Nivola, a senior analyst for Yemen and the Gulf at Armed Conflict Location and Event Data, a crisis monitoring group. You're listening to a liberal progressive podcaster, an audio show host who is telling you that what the Biden administration was doing wasn't very effective. And what the Trump administration is continuing to do isn't going to be very effective as well. However, SecDef Slick Hair, Whiskey Leaks, the DUI hire, Pete Hegseth, wants to work on messaging for, as he said, they need to stay focused on, one, Biden failed, so you continue what Biden was doing, and two, the Houthis are Iran-funded. Okay, that's, yes, by all means, tie the two together. He continued in that Signal chat, the now infamous Signal chat, waiting a few weeks or a month, he's talking to Vice President J.D. Vance here, waiting a few weeks or a month does not fundamentally change the calculus. Yeah, that's kind of what the analysis in the New York Times is saying too. He said, two immediate risks on waiting. One, this leaks. That's prescient. And we look indecisive. Two, Israel takes an action first. Can't let somebody else get the bluster. Israel takes an action first, or Gaza ceasefire falls apart, and we don't get to start this on our own terms. We can manage both, Hegseth writes. We are prepared to execute, and if I had final go or no-go votes, I believe we should. This, not about the Houthis, he says. I see it as two things. Restoring freedom of navigation, a core national interest, and two, reestablish deterrence, which Biden cratered. Except you're taking the same tact that Biden employed in the final year of his presidency. It's The Ron Show. America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms at Ron Show ATL. We're all over it. Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook, Instagram. I'm sure I'm forgetting. Twitter, X. Yeah, still there. You can also call the show 404-919-2725. As to whether or not the Signal chat was or was not classified, let me cue up here Rachel Maddow discussing what former Black Hawk pilot and Senator Tammy Duckworth had to say on the matter.
Senator Tammy Duckworth, an Army helicopter pilot who lost both legs in combat. She now serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee. She had this to say today in response. This is an official statement released by her Senate office. I will warn you, it contains a thinly veiled swear. Statement says, quote, Pete Hegseth is a effing liar. This is so clearly classified info he recklessly leaked that could have gotten our pilots killed. He needs to resign in disgrace immediately. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. Senator, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I appreciate you making the time.
Thanks for having me on, Rachel. It's such an important issue that you're covering.
We first learned about this about midday on Monday. It's now Wednesday night. We have learned more over the last couple of days about what happened in this group text about these forthcoming strikes. This is a very strong reaction that you have had to it. It's not only profane, it is it's mad. You're angry here. Can you explain your reaction to it and why you think Secretary Hegseth should resign?
I think he should resign because he put those pilots in danger. If you look at the text chain, that's my response was immediately after I read the actual text chain that showed him putting up on this unsecured platform, the drones are going to strike. And then he put down exactly how long it was going to be until the F-18s were going to be over the target area. Right. If anybody had compromised that chain, those pilots could have been in danger. And that's why I was so upset. And I used my Army language in that text because he is the guy that's leading the military, and he put those pilots in direct danger. And by the way, if I were our allies, if I were the UK or any of our allies, I would think twice about sharing intelligence with us in the future, because we've shown that our Secretary of Defense, our national intelligence community, does not know how to safeguard classified information. And
she makes a valid point on it. You know, I saw an op-ed that Patricia Murphy at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote. The headline, pretty succinct here, Pete Hegseth has to go. And at first bristle, I thought, Pete Hegseth isn't the one that let Jeffrey Goldberg in on this chat. And by the way, the very loony Laura Loomer has a theory about Alex Wong, who works under Michael Waltz, being the one that let Jeffrey Goldberg in on the chats, and somehow that's because Alex Wong's wife is unduly influenced. Let me read from firstpost.com. A day after Goldberg made the disclosure of Yemen's war plan leaked on Signal, Loomer, who was on Trump's campaign trail last year, made a stunning revelation that there could be a possible China link. To support a conspiracy, the right-wing commentator pointed fingers at Alex Wong, U.S. Principal Deputy National Security Advisor, because his wife, Candace Wong, is of Chinese descent and once worked as a prosecutor on January 6 cases. You can't make that shit up. So anyway, Patricia Murphy had opined that it was time for Pete Hegseth to go. I, at first bristle, thought, it's a little early for that. But at the same time, Pete Hegseth did let all this information out on an unsecure app conversation. The Secretary of Defense should know better than that, right? You would think. Patricia Murphy writes, the Trump team's latest offense is also its most dangerous. A group chat on the encrypted text messaging app Signal finalizing details of an attack on Houthi rebels in Yemen. Such operational details are typically highly classified, including on the text chain where the highest-ranking members of the president's national security team, from Vice President J.D. Vance to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and others. Unnoticed by the rest of the group, Waltz also accidentally added Jeffrey Goldberg, the top editor at The Atlantic, who read the messages, planning the attack in real time, and then published some of what he learned Monday under the headline, "The Trump administration accidentally texted me its war plans." He thought it was a joke, he wrote, until the bombs started dropping that Saturday. The most sensitive information, including the exact day and time of the attack, was shared by Hegseth, along with a text to the vice president about European freeloading. It's pathetic, Hegseth wrote. I mean, the diplomatic damage done by that sort of cavalier conversing on a pedestrian app. When, speaking of Doge, our Defense Department, our U.S. military, our federal government have secure channels, actual remote location. People, like you can literally walk into secure rooms so that you can't have your conversation overheard or overseen. Nah, let's just use Signal. I mean, what, did Mike Waltz not accept Pete Hegseth's follow on Snapchat or something? Why not just use Snapchat? It's just, I tell you what, actually, I heard someone make a really valid point about a similar situation not all that long ago.
If it was anyone other than Hillary Clinton, they would be in jail right now.
Correct.
For what has been done. Because the assumption is in the intelligence community, if you are using unclassified means, there is the potential for and likelihood that foreign governments are targeting those accounts and gathering intelligence from them.
Absolutely. That was, who was that? Oh, that was Pete Hegseth, weekend anchor at Fox and Friends. Well, that's awkward. Back to Patricia Murphy's piece in the AJC. Why are people not resigning, asked Richard Curran Kelly, a West Point graduate and former Army intelligence officer. Beyond operational details, the Trump team chat also reveals the broader thinking and decision-making process of the highest U.S. national security officials, Kern Kelly points out. He especially worries that similar deliberations could have happened related to military operations in Ukraine, Gaza, and other hotspots, saying, we have no idea what was picked up. Because if I were going to be collecting electronics intelligence, I'd certainly be up targeting every phone number related to anybody in the administration. Are these the high standards Pete Hegseth has been yearning to return our military to? Anyway, we've discussed enough about that. There is a continuing effort to marginalize the LGBTQ plus in the state of Georgia, and we've got to talk about that. And we're going to. My guest, Jeff Graham, Executive Director at Georgia Equality, is standing by to talk about more religious freedom push and denial of medical services for trans individuals in the General Assembly happening today and in the final days of the General Assembly session. We'll get to that. The Ron Show, America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or thank you if you listen via podcast, wherever you podcast.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Joining me, Jeff Graham, Executive Director at Georgia Equality, and a pretty busy man here in the final days of the Georgia General Assembly. And I know you don't look at it as wins and losses, and you can't always look at a legislative slate as, complete wins, complete losses. Sometimes we dodge bullets. Sometimes we mute the effectiveness of targeted legislation. And I think so far we can look at this session with a little bit of a mixed bag of feelings. Would you agree on that assessment?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's a mixed bag. We've got a good bill that we're supportive of that would expand HIV prevention, that is waiting on a final vote in the House, and then hopefully we'll go to the governor's desk. There's a couple of bad bills that came out of the Senate that have not had a hearing in the House yet, but there are now 4 bills that we're extremely concerned about, what we're calling the slate of hate. 2 of those have had some major rewrites that take out some of the worst language, but we still are very opposed to them, still very concerned about them because they could be changed as they continue to work their way through the legislative process. And then we have 2 bills that are just devastatingly horrible that we need to do our best to stop.
Well, let's start with a devastatingly horrible. I guess the first one I would think of is the latest religious freedom push. That seems to be pretty dangerous, and that's not. Listen, there are those who think that's just the LGBTQ plus, that doesn't affect me. I don't necessarily think that that's the case.
No, that is not the case, and that's part of why we want to be down there. It's Senate Bill 36. This is legislation that we have been battling for over a decade here in Georgia. The freedom of religion is an incredibly important value that needs to be protected. But this legislation, as we've seen it used across the country, and even with the federal RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that it's based upon, because of court precedents, especially over the last decade, more and more it has changed from being a shield for people of faith to a weapon that is used to discriminate against others. Specifically here in Georgia, we have 18 municipalities that have passed non-discrimination ordinances that protect all people from discrimination, discrimination based on race, national origin, sex, age, veteran status, disability status. Yes, it includes sexual orientation and gender identity, but it also includes religion. So we feel that creating this even playing field of civil rights is the best way to move forward. These 18 non-discrimination laws are so critically important here in Georgia because we're one of only 3 states that lacks a statewide civil rights law. So if we create civil rights protections just for people of faith, automatically they're going to be protected to a heightened degree than anyone else. And what we've seen these laws used nefariously in other places is to withhold access to HIV prevention medications and contraception. That's actually a case that will be heard by the U.S. Supreme Court next month. We've seen it used in South Carolina by state-funded adoption agencies to refuse to work with Jewish and Catholic couples because those people practice the wrong religion. We've seen across the country police officers say that they don't want to work security details for mosques or for pride parades. This is where it just gets disruptive. And we don't need that in Georgia. That's why the legislature has rejected it for the past decade, most famously in 2016 when Governor Deal vetoed the legislation very publicly. Just a week ago, Governor Deal was asked about it, and he said that was one of the things that he was proudest of in his time in office, because Georgia is better than that. And this legislation is not reflective of the value of Georgians, and we couldn't agree more.
So do you guys at Georgia Equality or through your lobbies, do you do a head count? Do you have an idea what numbers look like when it comes time for votes on issues like this? I mean, what is the general sense on this religious freedom? Like how real is the danger that this is going to get passed this session?
Well, the danger is very real this year. So what happened yesterday in the House Judiciary Committee was pretty unprecedented. They basically threw the rules out. There had already been an amendment to this bill. They just said that they were not going to recognize that amendment.
And what amendment are we talking about?
And rushed it through on a vote. There is some bipartisan opposition to RFRA, but I am hoping that we can slow this down and stop it again this year. But it's going to be a real difficult challenge to do, and this is why we're really hoping that in addition to folks that live in those 18 municipalities, folks from Gwinnett County, throughout Metro Atlanta, over in Augusta, Athens, Savannah, Statesboro, will speak out, that we can also get faith leaders to come down to the Capitol and explain that religion is not under attack here in this state. And we just don't need this legislation that further divides us at this time.
So you mentioned something of an amendment that had been attempted to be, was this some sort of like a poison pill to make it untenable to vote, or?
Well, actually, there were three amendments that had been introduced last week. One was an ad litem amendment from the Georgia Municipal Association that had been approved, and that basically was going to give these local governments an opportunity to try to resolve a claim of discrimination against people of faith before it proceeded through the court system.
I see.
There were two other amendments that were introduced by Republican Representative Deborah Silcox that, frankly, would have made clear that this law, if it becomes a law, that this bill could not be used to avoid civil rights protections on a federal, state, or local level. That amendment was rejected by the bill's author. Tie vote, rejected by the bill's author. The second amendment would have made it clear that it would not invalidate the protections offered in non-discrimination ordinances where they exist in local municipalities. Again, that was a tie vote. The chair asked the bill's sponsor what he wanted to do. He again rejected that. So that's why we feel very clear that despite the protests from the bill's sponsor and the people backing this, that it is not a harmful piece of legislation, that we do now know clearly that its intent is to create a license to discriminate.
Jeff Graham with Georgia Equality Executive Director joining us. Deborah Silcox is an interesting case because, as you mentioned, she's a Republican, and yet she is apparently something of an ally in tamping down or at least minimizing damaging legislation like this.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out when folks from either party cause harm, but it's also important to point out when folks from either party do good. And certainly, Representative Silcox tried her best to make the RFRA legislation better. Frankly, yesterday she did a similar thing by voting against the other bill that we're very concerned about, which is Senate Bill 39, which would strip health care for transgender folks from the state employee health benefits plan and prohibit transgender health care or gender affirming care from being offered at any facility or clinic that receives state funds. And she did vote against that when it was in committee yesterday. Once again, it was a tie vote. The chair kicked it, and so these are clearly controversial bills with bipartisan opposition, and we just don't need them here in Georgia. They will harm people. Certainly members of the LGBT community, most specifically our transgender loved ones. But in the case of RFRA, and frankly, I think in the case of Senate Bill 39 as well, it's bad precedents that could be used to harm other folks as well.
So I wanted to focus a little bit more on, not just specifically on Deborah Silcox, but on the fact that you do have Republican legislators under the Gold Dome that you can approach and converse with. This is not like Georgia Equality just doesn't go there and hang out with liberals and Democrats and, keep beating the drum. Like, you guys are actually actively working with legislators who are approachable in the Republican Party and to some effect.
Yeah, that frankly is part of why I appreciate and am grateful to be able to do this work in Georgia. The numbers are just not there for progressive Democrats to pass or stop any legislation on their own. Mm-hmm. And here in Georgia, while it gets stretched thin, oftentimes there still is decorum and there still is the ability for folks to work across the aisle. And Georgia Equality is an organization. I'm very proud of our ability to do that. It's not easy, and unfortunately, it's not always successful. Sure. But we've got a pretty good track record. The only anti-LGBT piece of legislation that has been signed into law since 2004 was Senate Bill 140 2 years ago that restricted access to surgeries and hormone replacement therapy for transgender adolescents. That was a horrible loss. It has now been contested. It's sitting in court. Again, we're waiting for the U.S. Supreme Court to issue a ruling in the U.S. versus Scrametti case that they heard back in December to see if this is constitutional or not. But frankly, it was a good long run of being able to keep the worst pieces of legislation at bay. But this is going to be a really tough legislative session. Certainly, the politics have gotten even more conservative, and the messaging and the desire to do harm specifically to transgender folks has just really gotten extreme.
While we're talking about bipartisanship here, I think there also needs to be a discussion about the concerns happening within the Democratic Party, that there are folks who want to lay blame at the 2024 election results at the feet of trans individuals or pro-trans advocates. And I've done a lot of pushback on that, especially in recent days, that there's this conception, I think a misconception, that the LGBTQ plus or their advocates and allies are far left or too progressive, and that economic issues need to be what's at the forefront of the Democratic Party's message going forward. To which I would say, we're impacted by the economy too. We're impacted by housing costs and the availability of jobs. and equal pay and opportunity, et cetera, and so on. Veterans issues. We serve in the military. So I've been rejecting that a lot, and I wanted to see you weigh in on that if you could, because Elena Parent caught a lot of flack for perhaps not being staunch enough an LGBTQ plus ally. I think her track record speaks for itself. Despite whatever quibbling one might want to have on one specific bill or whatever, but there is. I don't know if it's a growing sentiment, but at least some sense within the Democratic Party that they're willing to turn their backs on the trans if it means they can somehow woo the Reagan Democrat that they've not yet in the last 40, 50 years been able to woo back to the party.
Well, that is certainly my concern. This is not about one specific individual, because there's been lots of conversations with lots of individuals. You are correct. I reject the assessment that it was transgender folks asking for too much civil rights that caused Democrats to do so poorly in last year's elections. First of all, transgender individuals are people, not a political issue.
Thank you.
It is extremists, arch conservatives that have created issues by lying and distorting the truth about the transgender community and individuals who are transgender. They take advantage of the fact that it is a relatively small group of people, probably no more than 1% of the population. And most folks, oftentimes, if they've met a transgender person, they don't know that they've met a transgender person, or they've just not met a transgender person. And so it creates an opening, again, for these lies, this misinformation about transgender individuals getting elective surgeries in prisons that other people don't get. The instance of healthcare for inmates, that's a precedent set by the 11th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals. That's not a body that's known for its progressive liberalism.
Well,
it's one of the most conservative courts in the country.
Yeah, and
if they're siding with transgender folks, it's because it is a basic civil and human right that we're talking about here.
Enshrined in the Constitution, and something that if you want to me, like if you want to nitpick about 2024, my big nitpick about trans issues with Democrats in 2024 was they didn't respond to the attack. The Harris campaign did not respond to that attack by saying, yeah, the Constitution covers that. In fact, the reason I know that is because these same procedures were happening when Donald Trump was president from 2017 to 2021. Like that just wasn't said. It's such a simple response, and yet there was this trepidation, this fear to embrace what was law of the land before Kamala Harris was vice president.
Yeah. And it's again, a lot of folks say that they struggle for the messaging around this. I personally think that the message needs to be no more complicated than for someone running for office to say, I support the civil and human rights of all people, including those who are transgender and those who come here from other countries.
All right. Jeff Graham, Executive Director at Georgia Equality, going to take a quick break, and I'm going to let you tell everyone how they can continue to beat the drum at the Capitol, literally, when the Ron Show returns on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Final few minutes of today's Ron Show. My guest is Jeff Graham, Executive Director at Georgia Equality. Jeff, I posted this on Sunday on my show page. I don't know if you saw this, but I am on the executive board for the Hotlanta Softball League. In fact, thank you. I hit up Jeff sometimes on occasion, like, hey, do you know somebody that ... And Jeff, you were instrumental. I don't know if you knew this. You were instrumental in connecting us with Transparent, the Metro Atlanta chapter of Transparent, who is our 2025 charity beneficiary this year. So we are fundraising. Hotlanta Softball League is, with our after game, social events and other fundraisers this season to support transparent of Metro Atlanta. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that you're doing it. It's a great organization worthy of everyone's support.
So, and Ben Ackley, I want to thank him for coming to our meetings. And I just want to read something that I posted after playing our first full week of softball games on Sunday. If you hadn't heard me mention it on my show, I play softball, a lot of softball, and I play in 2 Metro Atlanta LGBTQIA plus leagues in particular. And Sunday was our first Sunday for Spring Hotlanta Softball League season. I play on a team and help coach another. I also serve on the league's executive board. I've been in this league now going into my 5th season, and I have to tell you, I find it absurd and humorous, and most of all, sad, about the state of this country's acceptance of the LGBTQIA+. You see, serving on that league's board, I'm intricately involved in working to find competitive balance, and I won't pretend to claim that we're perfect, but we're always trying. What's most important is we're never telling someone or anyone, no, you can't play. Not if you're male, female, trans female, or even get this, straight. That's right, we let straight people play in the gay softball league, y'all. My league's been around since 1982 and its national governing body since 1977. The evolution of inclusive softball has been a near half-century work in progress versus the current state of regress elsewhere. It dawned on me Sunday, while playing on a team with men and women before going over to another field to coach another team of men, women, and a trans woman, the gays are nearly half a century ahead of the rest of the country in having figured it out. It being that the world is a better place when we find and make room for everyone, somehow in some way, to get involved in a game, a sport, a team. Anti-trans zealots get rebuffed by me because I've seen the effects that go into player safety and competitive balance. It can be done. Hell, it should be done. A decade ago, the nation was split on Michael Sam, a gay man playing professional football. Since then, Carl Nassib came out while playing in the NFL. It was pretty much ho-hum by then. Women's professional sports have led the way on inclusivity, actually. But suffice to say, we thought we were making progress. But a political movement needed a marginalized group of humanity to trample on, and too many of the rest of us stayed quiet because not enough of us knew what to say. Well, I do. Figure it out. Figure it out so everyone who wants to play can. It's really not that complicated. So let's stop making it so. It's not that hard. We have educators who can't figure this out. We have people who work at various levels of scholastic, county, state educational levels, and they can't figure it out. And yet, like I said, the gays have been doing this for nearly half a century. I just wanted to point that out again, and thank you for helping us partner with Transparent in Metro Atlanta. What can folks do? Final 3 minutes here. What can folks do? You literally are asking people to come to the state capitol and find you guys in the building where they can talk with constituents.
Absolutely. So, what's going to be the most effective way to push back against the slate of hate that we're facing right now is for folks to be down at the Capitol, speaking with their own elected officials and speaking with other critical elected officials that serve in critical roles down there that will decide what legislation will move in the final days. So we're going to be down at the Capitol every day that they are in session. So today's Thursday, the 27th. We'll be there today. We'll be there tomorrow, Friday. Then next week, we'll be there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So those are the days, the final 5 days that they will be voting on bills. We're going to be down there 10 o'clock in the morning. When they gather, we'll be down there probably until about 1 o'clock the next few days because they still are doing committee hearings in the afternoon. Next week, on Wednesday and Friday, the days may get a little bit longer. I'm quite sure that Friday, April 4th, sine die, we're probably going to be down there until midnight. So folks don't need to reserve time with us. If you're interested, just come down. We will be on the 3rd floor. We'll probably be over by the house side where the elevators are. Hopefully you'll be able to find us. We're usually pretty easy to find there. We can help you with the mechanics of speaking with your legislators and help you figure out how to tell your own personal story about why these bills are dangerous.
Yeah, and this is a great opportunity, by the way, to just see how the sausage is made for those who want to, or if your kids are out of class or you're going to take them out of class to teach them a little bit of civics. This is a great opportunity to do that. I thank you for doing that. That's not something that I think a lot of people, myself included, I didn't know you could walk into the state capitol and go up to the third floor. You don't have to beat somebody up with a flagpole to get into the capitol to talk to legislators? Crazy.
No, you just need photo ID.
Oh, Mike, that's it? Okay.
That's it.
All right. Jeff Graham, Executive Director, Georgia Equality. Thanks for joining me on the Ron Show today. I know you got to get to the Capitol to start hurting these folks that we're sending your way.
Thanks, Ron. Take care. Bye-bye.
And thank you for listening. Back tomorrow on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn.